The Taliban now threatens large parts of Afghanistan. An ISIS-linked group has emerged, and civilian deaths are expected to rise this year, nearly 2 decades after the United States invaded the country following the September 11th attacks. The war in Afghanistan is now 17 years old, making it the longest-running war in United States history. To put that number into perspective, young Americans can now enlist to fight in a war that began before they were even born. According to the UN in 2017, over 10,000 civilians were killed or injured as a result of the conflict, and it fears this year's number will be considerably higher. Many people have lost their lives, and millions have been forced to flee their homes since the beginning of this war. And the financial cost of this war is upwards of $1 trillion, according to some estimates. So why did the United States invade Afghanistan in the first place, and is anyone really winning this war? Let's start in 1996, when the Taliban, a hardline group, came to power in Afghanistan. Many considered this new government to be extreme because of their policies that restricted the rights of ethnic minorities and women. The US also didn't like the fact that the Taliban regime offered safe haven to the violent extremist group Al-Qaeda by allowing it to operate training camps in Afghanistan. And after Al-Qaeda bombed US embassies in Africa in 1997, the US increased pressure on the Taliban to hand over the group's leader, Osama bin Laden, who was also allowed safe haven in Afghanistan. But they refused to extradite him. So beginning in 1999, the United States imposed economic and political sanctions on the Taliban, and the UN also imposed sanctions that year. Then things reached a boiling point. Al-Qaeda attacked the United States on September 11, 2001, killing nearly 3,000 people. After the attacks, the United States and its allies launched a military campaign in Afghanistan on October 7, 2001. Within a month, it appeared like the US was achieving its goal of removing the Taliban from power and destroying Al-Qaeda's safe havens. By November, the Taliban had already begun to retreat from large parts of the country.
I feel very happy because the Taliban troops went from Kabul.
People of Afghanistan don't like these people.
As a result, the UN Security Council passed a resolution that called on the UN to play a central role in peacekeeping and establishing a transitional government. And by the end of 2001, the Taliban had officially collapsed and a new interim government was installed. But in 2002, that momentum began to slow down. Some say partly because the United States became distracted, shifting its intelligence and military resources away from Afghanistan and onto its new military campaign in Iraq. But experts have told me there was another reason things got worse in the country. They say from the very beginning that too much attention was given to the military side of the campaign, but not to the political side of things. Although a 2004 presidential election in Afghanistan was seen as a success, the following parliamentary election in 2005 were not, according to Human Rights Watch's Patricia Gosman. Throughout this time, Afghanistan has been plagued by allegations of corruption. Last year, the country ranked 177th out of 180 in Transparency International's Corruption Perception Index. The instability from that time paved the way for a violent insurgency in 2006, and things have remained unstable ever since. Now, 17 years later, the US is still fighting a war in Afghanistan, a war that was started under President Bush.
This is going to be a long struggle.
And continued under President Obama.
For the American people, this border region has become the most dangerous place in the world.
And is now in the hands of President Trump.
We're very, very proud of our military.
Trump, who said his initial instinct was to pull out of Afghanistan, had a change of heart when he was sworn into office. And instead of reducing the US's involvement, he increased it. So has it all been worth it? And is Afghanistan a better and safer place 17 years later? First, let's look at the status of the Taliban. The militant group has been resilient due to a combination of violent ideology, negotiation of the country's tribal complexities, and a huge surplus of funds from the heroin trade. Afghanistan has been credibly described as a narco state. Since the removal of the Taliban government in 2001, the group now controls more territory in Afghanistan than at any other point since the invasion. According to BBC estimates, the Taliban threatens an astounding 70% of the country and now controls large parts of Helmand and Kandahar province, key places where the US and international forces have fought in. Not to mention that groups associated with the so-called Islamic State, a militant group responsible for some of the most brutal attacks in recent time, have also been able to emerge in parts of the country. But are these attacks and the Taliban's gains a result of the US winding down the war? Not even close. In just the first 3 months of this year, for example, the US conducted more airstrikes in the country than it has in the past 15 years. Trump has also increased the amount of troops on the ground by several thousand. And while some argue that the United States needs to increase its military efforts in Afghanistan, others like former General John Nicholson, who was the commander of US and NATO forces in Afghanistan, has said that he believes the war needs to come to an end. But experts I've spoken to said that both of those approaches are the wrong way to think about ending the war in Afghanistan. Right now, it's too complicated to determine who is winning this war, but it's clear to see that the ones losing the most in this war are Afghan civilians. So should America's longest running war continue, or should it finally come to an end? Let me know what you think below and on Twitter. Thanks for watching Now This World.